So hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see our screen. We're going to get going in a minute and we still have people trickling in. So we're going to give those people the opportunity to get connected, and then we'll get started with that. And while we're waiting for people to trickle in, I want to go over a few preliminaries before we get going. So just so that we're kind of on the same page as far as our protocol, this session is being recorded. Your mic and video should be muted. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to type them in the chat window. I have my colleague Heather Johnson with me, and she's going to be monitoring the chat, and she'll answer some of the questions that can be answered right away, and then some of the more complicated ones, maybe we'll save them at the end. We will have time for questions at the end, and so you can either save them until later, or as we go along, feel free to type your questions in the chat. The recording and the slides will be posted. They'll be on on our Canvas site for Fulbright. They call it the Fulbright U.S. Student Program Resources. We'll give you instructions at the end of this presentation as to exactly how to get to it. But it is a joinable site for those of you who are affiliated with U of M and have a unique name. So, all right, I think pretty much it looks like everybody in the waiting room has trickled in, and we'll let other people kind of join and catch up with us as we go along. But I have quite a bit of material to present, so I think we're just going to go ahead and get going. So, just a little bit about myself. My name is Ann Takata. I am one of the fellowships and grants advisors at the International Institute. Among my portfolio, the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. I also work on the Fulbright Hayes Doctoral Dissertation Research Abroad, or DDRA Fellowship Program. I also work with the Fulbright Scholars. In terms of my background, I'm no longer practicing academic. I used to teach, but it's been a long time since I've actually taught a regular course. Although these days I do a lot of these kinds of informal info sessions, seminars, these kinds of things. But it's been a long time since I've actually taught an academic course. I'm a sociologist by training. My specialization within sociology are international comparative sociology, what they call complex organization or sociology of organizations, historical sociology, sociology of education, those kinds of fields. I also have a master's degree in East Asian Studies with a focus on Japanese studies. And I will also mention that I am a Fulbright alumna. I was on the Fulbright Hayes DDRA Fellowship, and back when I was doing my PhD in sociology, I was able to receive this Fulbright Hayes DDRA Fellowship, and I spent 12 months in Japan working in the various archives in Tokyo, doing research for my dissertation. So that's a little bit about me. And so the agenda for this session is to talk about the independent research project and making plans for doing an independent research project under the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. And so we'll talk about, well, what is it? What does it take to do an independent research project? What's a good independent research project? Obviously, Fulbright, as you know, is a competitive fellowship, and so you have to have a good project to propose for the fellowship. And so we'll kind of look at that. What does it mean to have a good project? From two perspectives. One kind of a very general academic perspective, general principles of what it means to have a good research project. And then we'll also talk about, from Fulbright's perspective, what is it that they're looking for in terms of what they would consider a good independent research project from Fulbright's perspective. And so then, on a kind of a more practical level, how do we collectively, or how do you craft, develop my Fulbright Independent Research Project so that you can actually propose something and apply for this fellowship? So the reasons for why you want to do an independent research project might be many. I want to kind of mention some of the long-term goal reasons for why you want to actually do a independent research project under the auspices of Fulbright. One might be that you're eventually looking at going to graduate school, or you're in graduate school right now and research is part of your curriculum. You might be thinking long-term for research as a profession or a career, either in an academic or a nonprofit or a government setting. Or you might be thinking about long-term, you want to do international collaborative projects, either in the nonprofit sector, government, academia, or even in the for-profit sector. All of those reasons, are good long-term reasons for getting that experience in doing some independent research. And Fulbright is a great way to get some practical experience in doing, internationally focused independent research. More on the short term, we're all thinking about applying for the Fulbright U.S. Student Program under the Open Study Research, one of the Open Study Research Fellowships within the independent research option. And to do that, you need to be able to write a statement of grant purpose. And this is an essay that describes your independent research project and your plan for the Fulbright grant period. And so, all right, so what are some of the practical things that need to go into that statement? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And in order to come up with that statement, well, what are some of the requirements? Well, you need to have a research topic or a research question, or maybe research hypotheses, if you can actually get that far in thinking about your research. You need to have some sort of a methodology. And by that, we mean, how are you going to go about answering your research question, or how are you going to prove or disprove your research hypothesis? So you need to have some sort of a methodology and to be able to explain what that is, how you're going to go about answering your research question. And then finally, you have to have some sort of a plan of action and a timetable for the Fulbright grant period. In other words, what are you going to do? What do you need to do to be able to complete your research project? And what's your timetable as far as during the Fulbright fellowship period? What are you going to do? And in what order? And how long is it going to take to accomplish your project? So these are some of the things that you want to think about in the background. And then let's get into a little bit more of the specifics of, well, what's an independent research project? Well, there are three parts to this. The name kind of starts off with some idea, right? So we were talking about an independent research project, and so we have independent, research, and project. So let's look at each of these words in turn. First, independent. Well, it means that you're on your own. Well, not exactly entirely, but for the most part, you're going to be on your own. And it means that you're going to be in charge and you get to make all the key decisions about what's going to happen with this project. It does also mean that you do all of the work, well, almost all of the work. Generally speaking, Fulbright is not a kind of project where you're in a large collaborative setting. Even if you are in a large collaborative setting, you're going to have your own piece that you're going to call your own. And so you're going to end up doing all the work, and that's the good part and sort of the not so good part sometimes. It's going to get you all the experience. It's also, it's the fun part of doing research, as well as some of the more tedious and kind of the grunt work part of doing research. And so you do get to do all of the work and experience both the good parts and the not so fun parts of doing research. Yes, it's independent, but you will still have your mentors, advisors, and colleagues that you can consult. And this is part of the setup of Fulbright, is that you will have a host mentor in the country that you're going to go, and you will have mentors, advisors, and colleagues that you're going to be working with. So yes, it's independent. It's most, it is your project and it's your own project, but that doesn't mean that you can't get help from other people as you need them. Okay, research, second part. Generally, very broadly speaking, research is it's what you do to answer a question or solve a problem, develop new knowledge. These are all activities that we very broadly call research. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about exactly what we mean by research and what does it take to do research in just a minute. And finally, the third word, project. And it's a project because it has a time limit. And so, it has to be done at a particular period of, at some point. And the end of your Fulbright fellowship period is it's the end point of your project. And we like you to have a finished, some sort of an end product at that point, whether it be results of your research, some sort of conclusions, answers to your questions, things of that sort. Maybe it'll lead to some sort of a journal article or something that you can publish, maybe not, but we want some sort of a tangible result, and that's why it's a project in the sense that it has well-defined limits and it's going to have an endpoint. All right, so independent research project. Let's talk a little bit more about research. So a couple of definitions. So research is formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with a purpose. So that's one kind of way of thinking about research. So obviously, in order to be able to do research, you have to be curious and you have to have some ideas and you have to be asking questions. So another definition, the systematic study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. That's in the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of research. Another way of looking at research is to try to solve, real world problems. Identifying the problem, examining why we have these problems, what are the causes, and then thinking about and proposing and designing potential solutions to these problems, and then see if we can implement policies or programs to solve these problems, and then evaluating the effectiveness of those policies and programs that you implemented. So, that's all part of research. And so there are, lots of different ways of thinking about research, but research really is asking questions, trying to develop new knowledge, trying to solve real world problems. Now, research is also a journey in the sense that it is a long-term thing, and it has phases, and it starts off with planning. And so you are going to be designing your project, writing a proposal, submitting your Fulbright application. So planning is a big part of it. You also have to prepare for your research. So in addition to applying for a fellowship to go do your research, you should also remember that the Fulbright application is due in the fall, and you will submit your application. And then once you submit your application, you're going to have quite a lengthy waiting period while the results of that will come back to you, and you find out that you actually get the fellowship and you get to go and do your research. You should really think about that period not just as a empty waiting period, but as a preparation period. So after your application deadline, but before you actually find out that you have the award and get to depart, you can use that time to prepare for your research. So maybe these are things that you don't quite get around to doing by the time the application deadline comes around, but you should really be thinking about how can I use that time effectively to prepare for actually going out in the field. It might be things like finding out more about the location that you're going, reading up more on the existing research that's already been done, thinking more about your methodology and your data collection and all of those kinds of things. And then the next phase would be execution. That's when you actually get to go do your research. And so you find out that you have your Fulbright and you have your visa and all of that, and you actually get to get on a plane and go to your Fulbright location and to start actually working on your research. And then finally, you want to think about dissemination. In the sense of wrapping up your project, what are you going to find? How are you going to share what you find with your research project with people who are interested in similar topics? And so summarizing results, writing reports, maybe getting a publication out of it. Those are all things that you want to think about in terms of phases of your research. And so in that sense, research is a journey. It does take time, and it is a long-term process. And so this Fulbright journey it's in phases, but from the time between now and the time that you're actually done with your Fulbright, we're talking about 2.5 years or thereabouts. So this is definitely a journey that you're going to go along. All right. So let's think about, well, what's a good research project? Well, there are lots of research projects. You can ask lots of research questions. What's a good project as opposed to a not so good project? A lot of what we mean by a good research project really depends on the discipline and the topic of research. And various disciplines have different ideas about what constitutes good research within the boundaries of that discipline. And so, you talk to senior professors who've done a lot of work in a particular field, and they can, look at a research question and say, oh, that's a really good question, or that's a really interesting question, or they'll look at another question and say, oh, that's boring, or maybe, oh, this has been done before, somebody else has already answered this question. So you want a good research project, generally speaking, across many disciplines. Good research project always starts with a good research question. And by that we mean something that's intellectually interesting and exciting. Sometimes we call that as the cutting edge of research. Obviously, it needs to be academically rigorous. It's something, good research questions develop new knowledge. So we're trying to find out something that we don't know already. Or in a practical sense, good research solves a real world problem. It tries to study a problem and propose solutions so that we can fix these problems. So those are some of the kind of very general ideas about, academically speaking, what's a good research project. The other thing that you should also think about in terms of what's a good research project, it has to be right for you. And by that we mean you have to have the knowledge base and the academic preparation, the background to be able to consider that research question and try to find answers. It means that you need to be interested in the topic. And I will tell you that when you're involved in a research project that's like 8 months, 9 months, a year or more, if you're not curious and if you're not intrinsically interested in it, it's really difficult sometimes to sustain kind of the daily grind of doing research. And it's the interest and your curiosity that will sustain you through the kind of the not so fun parts of doing research. So yes, it has to fit your interests. It has to be something that you're interested in. It also has to fit your skill set. So you need to be able to at least develop the kinds of skills that are necessary to execute the research project and answer the research questions that you come up with. As I said, research is a journey. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have that skill right now, because you do have that preparation period between now and the beginning of your Fulbright fellowship. But it does mean that you need to be able to acquire that skill between now and the beginning of your project. Eventually, whatever project you're going to end up doing, you're going to end up carving out your own little niche that you're going to call your own, that you're going to claim as your own project. And so this is going to be your own little thing that you're going to call your own research project. All right, well, how do you go about finding a good research project? Well, a couple of different ways. First, a bit of self-reflection is always helpful. You should start with your academic interest, whether that be from courses that you've taken, some of the term papers that you've written, or maybe the lectures that you've gone to. Things that kind of sparked your interest one way or the other. Think about what you've been learning and studying in over the course of your academic career, and think about the issues, problems, questions that have sparked your interest. So curiosity and intellectual excitement is really important. You have to be excited about doing research. You have to be interested and curious, and then do some preliminary research, sometimes called literature review. Go to the library, or go, get on the library website and get onto one of the, the database, the gazillion databases that the library makes available to us. And, find out what's been done in that topic or area before. What research has been done previously on this topic? Who's working on that topic? Who's actively working on this topic? What's the latest developments? That'll kind of give you a feel for, what's a good research project and what's not. You don't really want to be working on in an area where the kinds of questions that you're asking have been answered by multiple people already. You want to be developing new knowledge, asking questions that haven't been asked before. So use all of those to develop your own research topic, questions, and hypotheses. So that's kind of the first step. Develop your own ideas, and then talk to people. Talk to your mentors, either your professors that you've had courses with, or that you've worked on their research. And ask them questions. Have them read your ideas about your research topic, questions, and hypotheses, and give you feedback. Those are all good ways of finding a good research project. Some tips and tricks that you might want to think about, especially in the context of Fulbright. Especially if what you've done in previous research is very much domestic focused on what's going on inside the United States. Cross-national comparison is a good way to expand your horizon and develop an international research topic that might be appropriate for Fulbright. So if you've been researching a topic within the United States, think about, well, what does the situation look like in another country? And see if we can do some cross-national comparison. And then you can think about what's a good location to go and study this topic. You might want to think about something that doesn't exist in the United States, some unique feature of a country, or a country's political system, or the way they do social services, or whatever it is. Exploring unique feature that only exists in a particular country, or maybe a subgroup of countries and that doesn't exist. What can we learn from studying something that doesn't exist in the United States, and maybe we can bring back and implement here? And that's another way of starting to ask about, well, what's a good research project, research questions. Join an existing research group. This is actually a really neat trick for, especially for those of you who are in the STEM fields, science, engineering, medicine, especially those of you who are working in like lab sciences, where you actually need bench space in the lab to be able to do the kind of research that you're interested in. So, find an active research group that is actively involved in, the cutting edge of research in a particular topic, outside of the United States. See if you can hook up with them and carve out a little project for yourself in the context of a research group. So those are some of the tips and tricks that people have used to come up with their own research project topics. Mentors and advisors are really important, and you have a great resource at the University of Michigan in terms of the faculty, the staff, postdocs, all of the researchers that are on campus. Use them to your advantage. Talk to your course instructors, professors, and GSIs. Talk to them about and ask them who's doing exciting research on this topic. Ask them about, do they have any contacts at other universities? Which universities are well known for this topic? Where, doing cutting edge research on this topic. And then ask them, can you introduce me to a colleague or collaborator or somebody who's working on a topic at a university abroad? Those are all things that you can do with your mentors and advisors. Now, it might be that the first person that you talk to might not be the ideal person, but maybe that person can say, hey, if you're really interested in this topic, go talk to this person. And maybe the second person might be able to get to a contact overseas. So it might take a few tries, but it's it's always worth kind of traversing your network and making connections. And by all means, use what you have access to. The University of Michigan is wonderful in terms of a resource. Most of the faculty are very interested in helping you along for something like a Fulbright project. So take advantage of that and use your U of M network to your full advantage. So I talked a little bit about working with an existing research group. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So for a lot of the large-scale research projects that have ongoing research, many of these research groups are open to short-term visitors like Fulbright Fellows. And so they're willing to have somebody come in and spend a year as a visitor working with that group and doing a project that's related to their group. And the advantage of that is that when you're working with an existing research group, they have the research resources. So they have the lab space, they have equipment. They also have a ready group of mentors and colleagues that you can work with. So that's the real advantage. And again, for the kind of research that requires a lot of lab space and equipment, it's really important that you get hooked up to an existing group that can give you access to lab space and and the access to the research equipment and things of that sort. It still means that you're going to have to carve out your own project within that research group. So yes, you're going to be helping the overall trajectory of the research group, but you will need to work with the group leaders and the mentors to carve out your own little piece of that research that you're going to call your own, that you can do under the rubric of the Fulbright Fellowship. Okay. In terms of practical considerations, in order to apply for an independent research project through Fulbright in the Open Study Research application, you will need to have a host institution affiliation and a host mentor. So in that sense, yes, identifying that location or that place that you're going to go with, a research group that you're going to be working with, is important, and that should be done relatively early in your project development process. The letter of affiliation may be required by the application deadline, maybe not. It depends on the country as to whether that's required or not. You will see the specifics of that laid out in the country award profile that's on the Fulbright website. So check on that to make to see if you're required to have a letter of affiliation by the application deadline, or you were just recommended to have one. If it says recommended, it's always better to have one than not have one. So check that out with the individual country-specific pages. Now, you should also keep in mind that your research project location may be limited by the availability of host institution and host mentors. Different countries have slightly different requirements as to who can be a host institution or a host mentor. Some countries are fairly open and will take a lot of different kinds of institutions. Most host institutions are universities, but they don't necessarily have to be universities. Sometimes government labs are okay. Sometimes if you're doing kind of the humanities type research, museums and archives are okay. In other countries, they're a little bit more strict and narrow as far as what's acceptable as a host institution. Some countries will say only universities can be a host institution. Some even have a list of specific universities and say that you need to be affiliated with one of these universities. So again, check on the country-specific award description and it'll be there. The other thing you need to keep in mind is that depending on the country and where you're going and the research culture of that location, you may need to alter your research project. Culturally sensitive topics and methodologies, you might need to alter them so that to be sensitive to the local culture and the local way of doing research. Sometimes politically sensitive topics are difficult to do. Something that might kind of provoke the government, the national government of the host country, is not particularly in the interest of Fulbright, and Fulbright being a kind of a public diplomacy program. They're not particularly interested in offending the host, the national government or the local government of the host country. So politically sensitive topics, culturally sensitive topics, and methodologies, you always have to be careful. And this is where having a good host mentor is going to be really helpful, because they're going to be the ones who can help you navigate through and be able to do your project, but still do it in a culturally appropriate and politically appropriate way. Okay, so in terms of the Fulbright's perspective of what's a good research project, let's talk about that a little bit. First, on the side of academics, obviously, this is kind of a recap of what I had said about, the research projects have to be, academically rigorous and academically interesting. And obviously Fulbright, of course, believes in that too. And so in terms of academics, your research project that you propose for Fulbright has to be academically sound, has to be intellectually interesting and exciting. So it builds on a good foundation of existing research. It has the potential for interesting results and innovative solutions, and also it should have a broad interdisciplinary appeal. So in other words, they're really looking for not kind of the really narrow research, but something that has more implications, that is publicly interesting, beyond just it's interested in this very narrow discipline. So academics, number one. Feasibility. This is something that Fulbright really pays attention to quite a bit. And feasibility really has to do with, can you finish the project within the Fulbright framework? So As I said, research is a journey. This Fulbright journey is about 2.5 years altogether between now and the end of your actual end of your Fulbright project. But your actual in-country period on the Fulbright Fellowship is approximately 9 to 10 months. The exact length depends on the country, but in most cases, it's either 9 or 10 months. And one of their concerns is, can you actually do what you're proposed to do within that time frame? Is that reasonable? Now, think about the 9 to 10 months that you're in the country, but you also have to think about, well, the first month or so, you're going to be kind of settling in and getting going. And then the last month or two, you're going to be wrapping up and trying to figure out how to, pack everything out and come back home. So realistically speaking, yes, it's 9 to 10 months, but maybe you actually have less than that, maybe 7 to 8 months of, it's good solid time that you can do research. So think, kind of keep that in mind. They also care about, do you have access to the right resources in terms of libraries and archives or laboratory equipment? Or if you need to travel within the country, is it safe to travel? Can you actually go where you need to go to do your research? So access to the right kind of resources is another thing that they look at when they're evaluating your project. Do you have the right skill set to actually do your research? Do you know, is the research method appropriate? Do you have the right skill set and the training to be able to execute that research method? Are you collecting the right kind of data? Can you analyze the data with the skills that you have? Those are the kinds of things that they will be looking for in evaluating your research project. Finally, relevance. Is the research topic appropriate for the location? So you're proposing to go to a specific country to conduct a specific research project. Is that research topic appropriate for that location? Is the country that you've selected relevant for that topic? Why do you need to go to this particular country to do your research project? Why is it significant? What is special about that country that makes it appropriate? An appropriate place for you to conduct that research project. As I mentioned before, there are some countries that have some restrictions and preferences as far as research topics or research fields. Indonesia used to be the country that I used to talk about. They don't have this anymore. At least they've toned this down quite a bit. But Indonesia used to have a list of quite a lengthy list of topics that were off limits. Now they've toned this down quite a bit, and so they don't really have topics that are strictly off limits anymore. But there are many countries that have preferences for certain types of projects or certain projects in certain disciplines or research areas. Those are again all explained in the country profile, the country-specific award profile pages, and so you should definitely check that out and pay attention to those. All right, so as we're getting close to the end, I want to talk a little bit about resources that are available to you in terms of figuring out your research project and your host country and host affiliation. We talk about two kinds of resources. I already talked about what you can tap into at the University of Michigan and the people who are here. Kind of the general Fulbright resources, and you can find these on the Fulbright, the National Fulbright websites, both the Fulbright U.S. Student Program website and the Fulbright Scholar website. So on the student program website, there is a large group of alumni ambassadors. These are students who have received Fulbright awards, have done it, have come back, and have been selected by the Fulbright program as good representatives who have agreed to talk to potential applicants about their experience and to share their knowledge of how things work. And there's about, I think, 15 years or so, a collection of alumni ambassadors that you can find on their website. And so you can, go and look and see who have done research in your discipline or in your area. And the alumni ambassadors have all institutional Fulbright email addresses that are on the website, and you can email them and ask them questions. And you can ask them, how did you find your topic? How did you, how did you find your, host institution? Those are all, things that you can do. Also on the U.S. Student Program website, there is a larger grantee directory, which is a list of everybody who has gotten a Fulbright U.S. Student Program grant, going back to I think they actually now have the database going back into the early years of Fulbright, the 1950s. And you can get names and countries and where the type of award, the country, and usually the discipline of the award. And these in the grantee directory, you don't have email addresses, but you can go in and look at who from the University of Michigan has gotten gotten the Fulbright in recent years. So you're going to have to do some looking in addition to finding out who they are. But if they're affiliated with the U of M, you can come back to the M Community Directory, see if you can look them up and contact them that way. The third thing I'm going to mention is the Fulbright Scholar Directory. This is the Fulbright program for faculty and postdocs, people who have PhDs who have gone on the Fulbright. And this is on the Fulbright Scholars website as opposed to the U.S. Student Program website. But in the Fulbright Scholar Directory, you will find both American-based scholars who have gone overseas, as well as international scholars who have come on the Fulbright to do research in the U.S. And the nice thing about all of this is that Fulbright alumni are very generous for the most part, and are willing to help other Fulbright applicants. And so that's another way of trying to get contact to see, who from the potential country that you're interested in, who have come to the U.S. to do research, and maybe that can get you hooked up with somebody in the country. So these are all resources that you can use to make connections with potential hosts and to get going on your research project. And one last thing that I'm going to talk about is our own U of M Fulbright resources. Just mention the Fulbright website, which is actually part of the International Institute's website. That's always a good place to get started, and that has links to all of the other things that we mentioned. The Fulbright U.S. Student Program Resources Canvas site. This is a Canvas site that we have developed for our own U of M applicants. It does require that you log in with your unique name, but this is available, and it's self-joinable for anybody who has a unique name. And you'll find lots of resources on this site. Heather and I are in the process of revamping the site a little bit, so you will see some changes coming to the site over the next maybe month or so. One of the things that you will find on the site in the files section is a collection of statements of grant purpose, the essays that previously successful applicants from U of M have written. So you can kind of see a collection of what kinds of projects that students have proposed before, and what does that statement of grant purpose looks like. So I encourage you to go and kind of browse through some of these and see what students have done, and just to get an idea of what's possible with Fulbright. And then finally, we have all of us, the Fulbright program advisors, and you can contact us by email at iafellowships@umich.edu, and we will be advising throughout the rest of the semester and into the spring and summer semester term, and we'll have regular appointments available. And so if you're interested, and please come see us, and we're happy to bounce off, have you bounce off ideas, and talk to you about your project. So just as a summary, as we wrap up, just key takeaways. As I said, research is a journey. It is a long-term process, but it's also a kind of a meandering but enjoyable process. And so you need to enjoy the process of it, but it does take some planning and execution. So the place to start is a good research topic or research question hypothesis. So it has to be kind of academically interesting, exciting, intellectually sound, and all of that. It also has to be the right kind of research topic. It has to be right for you. It has to be right for the host country. It also has to be right for the host mentor and institution. And again, really the key is the fact that you're here is a good sign that you're getting started, because this is still relatively early in the process. Work with your mentors and advisors and use the connections and the networks that you have to help you along with your journey. All right, so this is the end of the formal part of the presentation. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to see if we can answer some of your questions.